Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation, and we'll start with a land acknowledgement. So the 519, as an organization that is based in downtown Toronto, is located on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Chippewa, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And that is land that is part of Treaty 13. And that was signed between the British government and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And like many treaties, um, it has not always been honored. It has not always been kept as a promise. Um, and that is the story of many agreements, many parts of relationships between colonizers and Indigenous people. And really, all of Canada has been built on land that is stolen from Indigenous people. Um, Despite the appearance of peaceful agreements, um, many of those have not been honored, as I said. Um, Toronto is also part of land that is covered by an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe confederacies when they were beginning to share land around the Great Lakes, and they knew they needed to have a peaceful agreement that would allow their nations to share the land peacefully, to be able to make sure that everyone has access to enough of the food and the water and the medicine, and without taking too much, and also that that would be sustained for future generations. So that's called the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Agreement, and it was symbolized by the dish and the spoon. And the idea is that the land is represented by the dish, and it must be, passed around and shared among everyone who is living there. And the idea of the spoon is to show that there are no knives at the table, that it is a peaceful agreement, that there should be no violent conflict over the land and the resources, and that everyone can take what they need, but also make sure there's enough for others and for future generations. And that law, along with the Treaty 13, still applies on this land today. Along with land theft that is part of colonialism, we've also had theft of culture and language belonging to Indigenous people, and also ideas about gender and sexuality that have been held for centuries among communities here, nations here, um, because many of those ideas and practices and traditions and beliefs did not match up with what the white Christian Europeans wanted to impose. A lot of those ideas were violently erased and taken away, and those practices were stopped, prevented, often with violence. And the residential school system in Canada was one of the strategies used by the colonizers to make sure that those ideas would not live on among the children. They were subjected to the forced Christianization um, that happened to many Indigenous people across Turtle Island and around the world. So a lot of ideas about human sexuality and about gender identity were stolen away. And instead, we have this imposition of homophobia and transphobia, which is still very much part of the way society, our settler colonial state treats treats people in terms of their relationships and their own identities. And a lot of the hate and the fear that we currently are seeing in our society is a direct result of that process of colonization and the erasure of more expansive ideas about gender and sexuality. Um, so I want to say miigwech, which is Anishinaabe Muin, for thank you. Thank you for coming to this talk. Thank you for listening. And thank you to the many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who are continuing to contribute to protect the land that we are all benefiting from, who are continuing to put their lives on the line uh, to defend the land, and also those who contribute so greatly to the growth and the development and the learning that is happening on an ongoing basis among so many of us. And I just want to tell you that this map is taken from this website, nativeland.ca, which is a terrific resource for learning about the land you're living on, about the languages that have been spoken there over the centuries, about um, treaties that apply to that land, and names that the places have been called. And those are other parts of language that have been stolen away, and aspects of knowledge that have been stolen away by colonialism. So thank you for listening to my land acknowledgement. And of course, a land acknowledgement is only a starting place. We also need to continue that process of learning more about the truth of the land we live on, and also work towards reconciliation, rebuilding right relationships between Indigenous people and settlers, and also to acknowledge that many of us have arrived here on this land against our will, in a variety of ways, including the transatlantic slave trade, and that Canada has been built with the labor of those people as well. Um, and yeah, so thanks for listening. And I'm going to move on into my presentation. So this is me. My name is Jo. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a facilitator in the Education and Training Department at the 519. So I have the privilege of being able to speak to many different audiences in my work life, and be able to share some learnings that I've had and some of the expertise that the 519 has gained over the many years of working with community members. And the 519, if you're not familiar, we are a community center based in downtown Toronto, and we serve the neighborhood as a community center. And we also have a special mandate to serve queer and trans people across the Greater Toronto Area and beyond through Southern Ontario. And we are one of the largest 2S LGBTQIA organizations in Canada. And we have been doing this work in this place since 1976. So coming up on 50 years next year. And if you have not been to the 519, it's a gorgeous building full of really beautiful people who are very passionate about our work. And it's a vibrant place where many different communities come and gather and organize and advocate. And it's a terrific place to work. So today, obviously, as part of celebrating Bisexual Awareness Week, and tomorrow is Bisexual Celebration Day. I'm offering this talk just to provide some awareness about bisexuality and some of the language that can be used to describe bisexual identities, and some of the ways that biphobia has harmed people and how we can work to shift that. So just to get us started, I want to share the letters and the words they stand for in the initialism we use, or acronym that we use at the 519. So you've already heard me say at least once 2S LGBTQIA. That is a long string of letters, but they each have a very important meaning, and they're each in our acronym for a very important reason. So the 2S stands for two-spirit, the L is for lesbian, G is for gay, B is for bisexual, and that's what we're talking about today. T is for trans, Q is for queer, I is for intersex, and A is for asexual. And these are all terms that have to do with gender and sexuality. And they are all aspects of identity that many people have that have, brought about experiences of oppression because of the systemic oppression that exists in our society. All of these identities have faced tremendous oppression and discrimination in our society. And so the work that we do at the 519 involves advocating for and providing support for and programs and services for members of these different communities. Um, and the B is right there in the middle, and it's an important word. And I'm going to share a little bit with you about what that word bisexual means. But first, I want to talk a little bit about a concept called intersectionality. This term was created by a brilliant woman named Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. And she's a Black feminist and a legal scholar and a very important figure in civil rights activism. And what this word means is the way in which people's lives are shaped by multiple and overlapping identities and social locations, which together can produce a unique and distinct experience for that individual or group. For example, creating additional barriers, opportunities, and power imbalances. So, in more simple terms, we are all complicated individuals, and we're all made up of many different identity pieces having to do with things like race and gender and sexuality and how we interact with colonialism and whether or not we're indigenous or settler and whether we're able-bodied or disabled. And none of us are just one of those pieces. We're all made up of many overlapping and interacting aspects of our identity. And some people who share, I might share a part of my identity with you, and you might share a similar part of your identity with me, but we're both very different in terms of how we experience the oppression that goes along with that because of other aspects of our identity. So I want to share with you a graphic that might um, help us think about and talk about this a little more. But first, Audre Lorde, who's another Black feminist and brilliant writer, she said there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. We're all made up of these many, many pieces of ourselves that are all important and they overlap with each other. We can't separate out one piece. So even though I'm talking to you today about bisexuality, which is one form of sexual orientation, that can't be separated out from all the other aspects of our identity. So, for example, this is called a wheel of power and privilege. And what it helps us understand is our social location and our relationship to power and privilege. So, for example, yes, I am a queer person. So my sexual orientation means that I experience levels of heterosexism, which are not necessarily experienced by straight folks. I'm also a trans person, so I experience cissexism, which is discrimination against trans people. However, I'm also a white person, and as a white person in this society, I have a tremendous amount of privilege. I'm able to walk through almost any situation that I need to be in, and I'm not given a whole lot of trouble. I don't face many barriers in accessing what I need, whether that's from, the medical system or the legal system or the education system. Um, I do experience, as I said, some discrimination based on my gender and my sexuality, but overall, that is minimal compared to the privilege I have as a white person with English and a good job and a place to live and college educate, university education and a European heritage and so on. So it's important to think about this because when we are thinking about supporting marginalized communities, um, when we're thinking about practicing allyship, we need to be aware of where we hold that privilege. What are the aspects of our identity that give us access to decision making, that give us ease of navigating systems? And we need to use that privilege in order to practice allyship, in order to support those who face greater degrees of discrimination. So I know that's a lot of information packed into one small graphic, but I hope you'll find that helpful and think about intersectionality when you're thinking about other people's experience of discrimination. It's not just based on one aspect of who they are. Okay, shifting over now, I want to talk about one particular system of oppression that exists in our society, and that is heterosexism. And this is the marginalization or the oppression of people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, asexual, based on the idea that heterosexuality or being straight is the norm, and the idea that romantic and sexual relationships and feelings between a man and a woman are acceptable and so-called normal, and that all other relationships or feelings are unacceptable. So all of these words, gay, bisexual, queer, asexual, lesbian, these are all words that have to do with sexual orientation. That is who we feel attracted to. That might be sexual attraction, that might be romantic attraction, that might be emotional or spiritual attraction. And these are all terms that are different from straight. So straight people or heterosexual people, they experience attraction only with people of a different gender than their own. But lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, asexual, these are all different types of sexual orientations that are not straight. So if you've heard of the term homophobia, which is acts of violence or hatred, it's supported by heterosexism. So you might say, well, I don't hate gay people, but then you might actually be, without even realizing it, you might be reinforcing heterosexism just because of all the things that are already in place in our society, all the ways that people learn about relationships from television, from school, from their friends, from their parents. Um, that reinforces that idea that only heterosexuality or straightness is normal, and that anything that is not straightness is something to be looked down on or avoided or is weird or is abnormal or is sick. There's a lot of ways that queer folks have been discriminated against just by the ways people think about them. The other idea I want to share with you is monosexism. Now, this one is maybe less talked about, but it's really important when you're thinking about discrimination against bisexuality because monosexism is the idea that people will only be attracted to one gender. Whether they're gay or straight, they're only going to be attracted to one. So either they're attracted to people of the same gender or of a different gender. So this is marginalization or oppression of people who are bisexual or omnisexual, pansexual, asexual, based on the belief that sexual or romantic attraction to only one gender is the norm, and that attraction to more than one gender is abnormal or unacceptable. And monosexism supports biphobia, that is, hatred of or fear of people who are attracted to more than one gender. And it might not be really obvious as we're moving through our day-to-day life that these systems of oppression exist and are impacting us all. But that's what's so important about becoming aware of them. As soon as you really start to notice and pay attention, you start to see the ways in which these things are reinforced and held up and used as an excuse for discriminating against people whose sexuality is different than straight. Oh, okay. Thanks for asking. The slide Oh, the previous one. Yes, sure. So monosexism. It's similar to heterosexism, and it is simply about the preference, the advantages given to people who are attracted to only one gender. And this has contributed greatly to the erasure of bisexual as a sexual orientation because people assume, oh, you're either gay or straight. A lot of people don't consider or respect the fact that people might be attracted to more than one. So that's what leads to and supports biphobia, which is hatred and prejudice specifically against people who are perceived as being in the bisexual community. Um, um, and it can take the form of denial that bisexuality is a genuine sexual orientation. It can take the form of negative stereotypes about people who are bisexual. And I'm going to go through some of those negative stereotypes in the next slide. But first, not the next slide. First, I want to talk about bisexuality as a word, as a concept, as a sexual orientation. Um, these are some of the terms that can also be used for folks who are part of bi plus communities. And just remember, it's really important that people have to be given the opportunity to share what words mean, what words are important for them. So you might know that someone is bisexual, but you might not know that what language specifically they want to use to describe their sexual orientation. So it's really important that we not impose assumptions on people and say, "Oh, well, you've dated this person and you've dated that person, you must be blank." Leave it up to people to describe themselves for themselves. But these are some of the terms that have been used. Basically, bisexuality is attraction to both people of the same gender and of different genders. So someone who is bisexual might say, "Oh, yes, I'm attracted to both men and women," or "I'm attracted to people who are men and non-binary folks." It's a wide open, gender is more than just one or the other. There's more than two genders that exist. It's actually a whole galaxy of gender identities. And some people are attracted to a couple of those, and some are attracted to all of them. So, biromantic is another term that gets used. That's people who experience romantic attraction to more than one gender. Polysexual is that opposite. We think of monosexual as being attracted to only one gender, but polysexual is being attracted to many genders. Pansexual, some people use that to say gender is not part of what I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to people as individuals, regardless of their gender. We use the term bi plus communities because we want to recognize that not everyone uses the term bi or bisexual to describe themselves. There are many other terms, so that concept of bi plus gives space for all the different ways people describe themselves. There's also attraction. Sorry, we know from statistics that anywhere from 40 to 60% of 2S LGBTQ plus communities are bisexual. So that's a huge proportion of queer and trans people who think of themselves as bisexual. And yet, despite that big proportion, there's a great deal of erasure, and bi folks are often prevented from feeling validated or being visible even within queer community spaces. So that's an important reason why folks created, Celebrate Bisexuality Day and Bisexual Awareness Week, is to help to increase that visibility. And I love this photograph of Lady Gaga, of course, and she is famously has described herself as bisexual and has talked openly, publicly about her attraction to and sexual relationships with both men and women. And I have not heard quotes from her more recently. If if she's expanding her list of who she's attracted to, but I have heard her say that she's attracted to both and that that's not a big deal. And so, in terms of making bisexuality more visible, she's definitely one of my heroes. So, these are some of the stereotypes. And I started hearing these when I came out as bisexual back in 1987. Um, I already knew that I was attracted to more than one gender. And so I used that term bisexual to describe myself. And I heard a lot of these ideas, and I remember hearing them much earlier in my life as well. Um, that, bisexual people are greedy, that we're more likely to cheat on our partners, that we're promiscuous, that we're just looking for threesomes all the time, that we're confused about our sexuality, that bisexual people have often been blamed during the AIDS crisis for spreading AIDS. Um, and we often get blamed for so-called reinforcing the gender binary and accused of using our straight passing privilege because, when if you're a bisexual person and your partner happens to be of a different gender, people assume that you're straight. Um, and and often because you become kind of invisible as a queer person, that is seen as having what's called straight passing privilege, that you can get away with um, being accepted or being having a sense of belonging, even if you're not actually straight. So these are some of the ideas that are shared among people or that are told to bisexual folks, like, this is why we don't respect you. And these stereotypes are all really negative, and they cause negative feelings to the people that hear them. Um, so it's important that we are aware of these stereotypes and these misrepresentations of who bisexual folks are. So Bisexual Awareness Week, just to give you a little bit of background, um, it started out with just Celebrate Bisexuality Day. I'm seeing there's a, yeah, I agree, Emirachi. Yeah, that's true. Too bad. Um, just so you know, I will take some questions at the end of the talk. So if you have things you want to ask about or slides that you'd like me to go back to, I can definitely do that at the end. We'll leave a little bit of time. So back in 1999, some folks named Wendy Curry, Michael Page, and Gigi Raven Wilbur decided they were all bi activists and they were participating in some events and some conferences and so on for queer folks, LGBT folks, and they kept feeling like they were being left out, that bisexuality was not being recognized at any of these events. And so they decided to start something called Celebrate Bisexuality Day. And they chose the month of September because their favorite bi icon, Freddie Mercury, who was the lead singer of Queen, the rock band, they chose his birth month as the month to celebrate bisexuality. And this is a photograph of Freddie Mercury. Um, uh, so yeah, and one of the three of them had a birthday on September 23rd. So they picked that day as a very special day. And then that was celebrated for many years. And then in 2014, Bi Awareness Week was created. So move it from just one day to a whole week of awareness and celebration and opportunities for learning. And also, more importantly, I think opportunities to break down that isolation that many bi folks feel, because so often we feel like we don't belong or we're not accepted in either straight spaces or queer spaces. And that people assume we are. either or, and they don't expand their awareness of sexualities to understand that many folks are actually bisexual. So that's a little bit of background about Bisexual Awareness Week, and it runs from September 16th, I believe, to the 23rd, the whole week leading up to tomorrow, September 23rd. So, in order to contribute to counteracting those negative stereotypes, to disrupting the discrimination and oppression that happens to bisexual folks, we need to understand a few important things. First of all, that work of disrupting and raising awareness and supporting, that's all part of allyship. And allyship is a process. It's not an identity. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm an ally," and not do anything about it. It's actually actions that you take. And it's a process of building relationships based on trust, of showing up and being consistent. And part of doing that is understanding your privilege. So figuring out where in society you hold privilege and then using that to make space, to open up the doors, to share your knowledge, to allow space for bisexual folks to be heard, and to not always be the one doing the talking or doing the leading, but allow space for bisexual folks to do the leading and to be heard from, have their stories heard. And it's important that you start your work of allyship from a place of responsibility, not a place of guilt. It's totally fine and understandable to feel guilty, but that can't be your only motivation. Um, there are many feelings that come up when you're practicing allyship. Sometimes anger, sometimes fear, sometimes nervousness or grief. And those are really important feelings to acknowledge. And you can learn from those feelings. But the thing is, you can't expect the people you're trying to support to be the ones that help you deal with those feelings. You have to deal with them either on your own or with your own support group, but don't try to shut out the feelings because they're important learning. And finally, don't expect rewards from your allyship work. Often it is very rewarding work, but that can't be your motivation for getting into it. So, one of the ways that you can help to disrupt both heterosexism and monosexism is by making small changes in your language, the ways that you talk about people, that you talk about relationships. And in English, and I know English is kind of a limited language and it's often very confusing because we use the same word to describe many different things. We have gender specific language, and unfortunately, words that fit into that category reinforce the gender binary. So words like ladies and gentlemen, or boys and girls, or mom and dad, even though some of those words might be beautiful and full of love, if that's how you're talking about people all the time, you're actually excluding a lot of folks. So, in order to avoid making those assumptions about people and reinforcing that binary system, because remember, gay and straight is also a binary, right? Man and woman or boy and girl, those are binary. That means a system of two, but also gay and straight. So you're reinforcing that binary of sexual orientation if you assume that people are either gay or straight. And you need to acknowledge that there's a lot that exists in between those two extremes. And a lot of people will use binary pronouns like she and he, um, just without even thinking about it. You assume that because someone looks a certain way, they must use certain pronouns. What's great is that we all have in our vocabulary words that are more expansive, that are more inclusive, that allow space for the acceptance and the validation of identities that are outside that binary. So if you use terms like partner to describe someone's, who someone's dating or who they're married to or who they are, making family with, partner is a word that is gender expansive. So a partner could be any gender. So if you're getting to know someone new and you want to know, who are you in relationship with? You could say, oh, do you have a partner? Instead of saying, do you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend? Because that's reinforcing uh, not only the gender binary, but you're also reinforcing that assumption that someone is straight or gay. So just say partner, then it could be anyone. And it's the same with other terms like you have the word siblings instead of brother and sister. Siblings is open, right? Folks, instead of saying, hey guys or hey ladies, you could say, hey folks. And then you're not assuming that someone is a particular gender. And this is all really helpful to avoid assuming that people have a partner of a different gender, um, or that they have a partner of the same gender. Either way, you shouldn't be assuming either thing. Once people tell you, oh, yeah, I have a partner who is a woman. Great, thanks for telling me. Or they say, oh, I'm bisexual right now. I'm dating a man. Great, thanks for telling me. And remember what they tell you and respect that and reflect it back to them. So these words are already part of our regular vocabulary, our day-to-day language, and you can just make that simple choice of using a word that is more expansive instead of just automatically using the binary or making assumptions. And you can use they, them pronouns until you know someone's pronouns. So if you're meeting someone for the first time and you want to ask them about their life, you can say, "Oh, is your partner coming? Do they have the day off as well to participate in this activity, or um, do you live with them?" And then once you know the person's pronouns, then you can actually use the correct ones. But they, them is fine until you know. There's some other things that you can do as well. So don't assume. I know I've been saying this over and over and over, but this is such an important piece. Don't assume that someone is either gay or straight based on their current partners. Um, Even if, it seems obvious that the person is straight, you can't know that for sure unless they tell you. So just avoid assuming. Don't expect people to be willing to educate you about bisexuality. It's your responsibility to do the learning, but it's not their responsibility to teach you. I'm doing this today because it's part of my job. I'm getting paid to do this work. And so I take on that responsibility, and I'm being compensated for that. Don't ask people to prove their sexual orientation, to share with you who they've had sex with or whatever. Attraction and sexual orientation is really variable, and the feelings that we have that we call attraction can be very small feelings or very big feelings. Sometimes we act on them, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we want to share those feelings with everyone, and sometimes we want to keep them private. So it's really important that you believe what people tell you and don't ask them to prove it. And that has often been what bisexual folks have faced. It's like, oh, you tell us you're bisexual, but we don't really believe you, so you need to prove it to us. And that is really disrespectful. Do respect and validate their identity. If someone tells you they're bi or that they're um, omnisexual or polysexual or pansexual, whatever terms they use, thank them for telling you, for sharing that with you. Um, Maybe keep it confidential because it might not be something they want shared with everyone. And also, validate their identity by not, by avoiding making those assumptions that we talked about, by celebrating the fact that they are who they are, and um, do whatever you can to be supportive of that. And finally, do remind them that they belong wherever they choose to be. A lack of a sense of belonging is a really harmful feeling. It really damages our self-esteem, our self-worth. Every human needs to feel that sense of belonging somewhere, whether it's in our family or in a community or a part of a social group that we're in. And because bisexual people have been excluded or not believed or not validated or celebrated for so long, it's very easy to feel very isolated, because when you're in straight groups, you know that you're not straight, so you don't really feel like you belong there. And so often in queer groups, or in communities, um, bisexual folks are seen as not really queer or not queer enough, and it's easy to feel like, oh, you don't really belong or fit in there. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have a Celebrate Bisexuality week, so that there can be spaces created for bi folks to feel a sense of belonging. Um, and also for other people to make it possible for them to feel like they belong wherever they choose to be, whether that's in a mostly straight environment or in a mostly gay environment, wherever it is, bi folks have the right to be there and should be able to feel belonging. I want to share with you a few resources. Um, One of them is a terrific set of events that happens every year in Toronto during Bisexual Awareness Week, and that's called the Bi Plus Arts Festival. It's been going on probably for, I want to say 10 years now. I'm not sure exactly how many, but it is a really beautiful festival with movie screenings and art exhibits and craft shows and gallery openings and readings of stories and poetry and burlesque shows and so many different events. It's just a packed week. And unfortunately, it has just wrapped up for this year. But I really encourage you to stay in touch with the Bi Arts Festival through their Instagram account or through Facebook or whatever, and um, and learn about what's going to be happening next year. It's also a great opportunity to volunteer, and that is one major way that you can show your allyship, or if you are bisexual yourself, you can uh, access some of that belonging and that community building that comes from working together to put on an event. The folks that run the Bi Arts Festival are super friendly and always eager to have support. There's also a group that meets at the 519. That's why it's on our website. It's called the Toronto Bi Plus Network, and they host support groups for men, for women, and also for all gender folks. And as they say, we put the B in Toronto's LGBTQ community. I love that. Um, and the BiPlus network has been running for a very long time. They have a presence on social media, and you can learn more about them by just going to the website, the 519 website. Um, I want to share with you this book called Getting By. It's by a person named Robin Oakes. Well, that's who edited it. It's a collection of stories from around the world about bi experience. Um, and there is a link in the chat for accessing that book. And there's also the bi.org, which is a great website, a terrific resource for learning more about bisexuality, and how you can be an ally. And I also want to offer one more resource that is super helpful, from an organization called Canadian Equality. And I feel like they have some really good tips on how to uh, deal with biphobia and bi erasure. So those are a few resources, um, and I encourage you to check those out. and to learn more about bisexuality. And I also want to make some time, as I said, for any questions. If you feel like turning on your mic and joining that way, you can. Um, but before I take any questions, I want to share with you um, this feedback. And I'm going to put oh, I don't have the link to this. I apologize. But if you use the QR code with your phone, you can access our feedback form. What I'll do is when I stop sharing, I'll uh, I'll go into my I'll go into the internet and access that link for you while you're thinking of your questions. And finally, just want to ask that you support the 519. We really depend on community donations to do our work. We also depend on volunteers. They are so important at the 519. We could not do the work we do day to day um, without the presence of many volunteers doing any one of a variety of roles, from packing food to providing legal advice. So there's a really wide range of opportunities. It can be really, really fun. It's a way to join in and feel a sense of belonging and value. So I encourage you to check out the volunteer opportunities. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'll be able to find the link for our what do you call it? What is that word? Um, our feedback form. That's it. And I'm also going to stop recording at this point. Oh, I'm struggling a tiny bit right in this moment. There we go. Stop recording.